Supervisors is ready to begin.
And I'll call the meeting of the Rockbridge County Supervisors to order.
Thank you guys for being here. The Rockbridge County School Board got the opportunity to hear from Quinn Evans at a recent meeting, and we are excited to have the opportunity for all of you to hear their presentation. We're excited about the work they've done. At a time when it seems like facilities are the last thing on our list, we felt it was important to keep up with this project and to begin planning. We won't be in a pandemic forever, and we've got buildings that need some attention. So thank you for your time this evening, and we look forward to seeing what Quinn Evans has to present to you all.
So Wendy, if you don't mind, I'll just quickly introduce Aaron Richardson and Roger Richardson with Quinn Evans. I see Charles Tilley on my list over here. I'm not sure if you guys have any other colleagues with you or not. But if you guys are ready, there's Charles. If you guys are ready, thank you all for coming and or at least making yourselves available to be able to present to the Board of Supervisors. We also have an invitation out to the Lexington City Council members and the Lexington City School Board members who may be joining us. And hopefully they are, so that they can hear the results of the feasibility study as well. So whenever you all are ready, feel free, and unless any other board members have anything they'd like to say prior to. Awesome. Aaron, are you leading this show at this point?
I'm leading the show. So
Awesome.
Thank y'all for having us this afternoon. We are excited to be here and share, for those of you who might not have seen prior, share with you our findings from the study that we worked on over the past year, actually. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Is that true? Am I showing properly? Okay, great. So this will be a lot of review for those of you who were participating in the May meeting where we presented, but we're going to be a little more brief. You'll be happy to know as we go through this time, and then focus really on the recommendations that are part of the report that was issued at the beginning of June. So this was a division-wide feasibility study for the school system of Rockbridge County. We surveyed all of your schools as well as the administration building. So I'll just introduce our team really quickly. Team included myself, Aaron Richardson, and Roger Richardson, who was the principal in charge of the project. Charles Tilley is our principal advocate. And then we also included with our team from a consulting firm, Susan, I'm blanking on Susan's last name, but Susan was Gooch, thank you. Susan was our consultant for all of the demographic analysis. So she and her team took care of that. And she's not here today. So there you go. Oh, Susan Gooch, I could have seen it right there. And Carl Chafin was on her team as well. We also included Ascent Engineering and Timmons Group to help us analyze all the building systems in the site. So the scope of this project included that demographic research that Susan and Carl executed, and that helped us to analyze how the future would look for enrollment of Rockbridge County, as well as Rockbridge County High School with Lexington City included. We did physical assessments of all the facilities as well as programmatic assessments so that we could make sure that not only were the buildings in good condition for your future years to come, but also that they would support the current learning techniques and pedagogies that you are working through now as far as part of your 21st century learning initiatives, but also moving forward. And then we also included, which is what we'll focus on mostly today, the identification of potential capital improvements. So really the overall summary is that you have a good base of buildings and you have, I think the big takeaways are you have good facilities, You have great programs. Your teachers and administration are thoughtful and excellent with training and keeping up with the current pedagogies and educational goals. We also observed that most of your schools are have plenty of capacity for the future, and we'll go through that in just a few minutes. And then you have a few areas where you do have a lot of room for improvement, mainly on Central Elementary School with a capacity issue, and on the high school with just a dated facility. So demographic analysis, we went over this a lot in the report, and so you'll be able to read through that in depth. But basically what our findings show is that you're going to have a pretty steady growth pattern as we move through and forward over the next few years. This is an analysis of the history and percent changes going from starting at 2010 through 2019. And then we looked at projections through 2029. And that's based on birth rates in the county and other analysis that was done by KNC. So the gist of it is that you are going to have a pretty steady growth pattern. Nothing is going to make you, drop off or escalate exponentially.
It's pretty stable.
Exactly.
Right.
So when we move into the assessments that we did for the facilities and the programs at those facilities, we had a couple different methods of information gathering. We went through site visits. All members of our team visited all the sites. We interviewed the staff at the schools as well as the main administration. And then we also reached out to the entire Rockbridge and Lexington community with a stakeholder survey. Some of you were participants in that. So that stakeholder survey had great participation. We had over almost 1,200 individuals were surveyed. Of those, 64% were students, and of the students, more than just over half were high school students. Interestingly, we had the most participation of students from the two schools that need the most work, which may be representative. We also had participation from the business community, from school board and city council, faculty and staff, and parents and guardians. And the key results from that survey showed us that there are certain areas that stood out as needing improvement. Some of those were outdated facilities, needing better furniture, emphasis on student-oriented spaces, and things like that. And also a lot about emotional, social wellness support. Some strengths that you have that we think really need support as you move forward are things like your project-based learning. That's extremely important in today's educational environment, and your teams are doing a great job of it. So that needs to be supported as you move forward. Career and technical education, you do have great programs here as well, including your community facilities, or as well as your community facilities, partnerships, and the soft skills that you instill in your students. So the key areas of focus moving forward that we heard from our stakeholders were, as you see on the right, a lot of things that align with the areas that you're already doing well and the areas that have room for improvement. And I will note, as of the student responses, overall, they focused on their physical and emotional wellness and well-being. So this is just a quick recap of some of the specific notes that were made by surveyors, those surveyed from the different facilities. So as part of the physical assessments, we looked at building systems, we looked at accessibility and code analysis of each of the facilities. We looked at the sites and evaluating them for everything from parking to drainage issues. And then we also looked at safety and security concerns. This is a lot of text to tell you basically that you all, as Rockbridge County Schools, have a really strong vision and goals statement that you've adopted. And as we've assessed the programmatic adequacy, we kept that in line with your stated vision and goals, as well as the experiences and knowledge that we have from our side to make sure that those two things are aligned as we move forward, that your vision and goals and the educational environment that is appropriate for current and near future learning and education are both going to be able to continue in these facilities. Charles and Roger, hop in if you hear me miss something.
You're doing well.
So when we looked at the capacity, we took the demographics studies, and we also analyzed the programmatic and capacities of the existing schools. So what you see here are elementary schools in Virginia, and us looking at the average enrollment for those schools and the average building area per student, as well as the range of both of those. So the average enrollment and our average building area per student are the biggest things that we were looking at when we analyzed the capacity. So I consolidated these onto one sheet so you could see all 4 of your elementary schools here. And what you really see standing out in this is when you get down to the total current capacity of each school and the projections for the enrollment that's coming up. So if you look at Central Elementary, the projected enrollment is that it might go up to 514 students. The total current capacity is 558 students, which in 2029 would put you at a utilization rate of 92.1%. We like to say that a good rule of thumb is that the capacity should not be that high for a school because of the way that you need to use your spaces. You know, something like a college or someplace, or even a high school, you could have a high utilization where spaces are overlapped. That's harder to do with an elementary school. So you can see that that's going to be nearing capacity or over capacity in 2029. With your other 3 schools, Fairfield, Mountain View, and Natural Bridge, you can see that even, you know, from 2019 all the way through 2029, you can see that we stick right around those mid-range percentages, which means you have plenty of capacity in your building to be able to maintain what you have now, but also to create spaces for certain activities that maybe you don't have room for now that would be supportive of future learning. So for instance, in a lot of your elementary schools, you have art being taught on the stage instead of in its own classroom. So potentially what this means is that we could figure out a great way to give art or music or something like that a dedicated space and shuffle things around is basically what it says. So you wouldn't need to build on or anything like that. You have plenty of capacity within your footprint to be able to work with. Now, Central Elementary, you'll see as we proceed forward that we do recommend some more major changes there. Does anybody have any questions about this before we move forward? Or anything so far?
Aaron, if you don't mind, could you, and maybe I missed it, I apologize, but with capacities, sure. If I remember correctly, you're looking at about 85% as being where ideal, we want to be.
Or maximum, I should say. So yeah, so when we are planning a new school, we plan for 85% capacity.
Okay, because so when we're looking at Central right now at 86.5, you're saying it's full. Because
exactly.
It's full.
That would be our cap.
Okay.
Yeah, I think,
so it's slightly over the cap.
I think the other, this is Roger, you know, the 85% is a target to accommodate changes in pedagogies and changes in programs and so forth over time, and also to accommodate any kind of variations in the enrollment that comes and goes over time. it's far more critical at a high school level where you need to maximize and at the same time allow certain spaces to be used for different purposes. Aaron's reference to a university environment would be that we call that a university model or a hoteling model, where teachers actually change rooms and you increase the capacity or the capability or the utilization of that space. In elementary schools, even though you all are starting to change classes, I believe, even in the 4th grade a little bit, which is sort of moving things around, you still have basically the same number of students sitting in those spaces all day long.
This is Dan Lyons. I have 2 questions. As far as Central's enrollment, are they all the students there in the Central zone? And 2, would it be possible to ease the overcrowding since we have room in the other schools with a little redistricting?
No, not all the students at Central live in the Central attendance zone. There's no doubt. We've had to over the last 5 years or so, we've had to manage it much more tightly. Early on, prior to 5 years ago, we pretty much allowed just about anybody that wanted to go there, which got it much overcrowded. We've got it back in a place right now where it's manageable, but it's full. So, but there's not. I don't know the specific percentages off the top of my head, Mr. Lyons, Dr. Lyons, but it's more than most of our other schools simply because it's centrally located. A lot of folks that work in town like to have their children close by in Central. I'm sorry, was there another question I didn't answer? What was the other one?
Yeah, have we looked at redrawing the lines for who attends?
Not at this time, no, sir.
On the elementary capacity, I see you're getting your numbers from the number of classrooms and 22 students average per classroom. Where did the 22 come from? Is that a district number, or is that an average across the state or nation, or?
Well,
Go ahead, Roger.
yeah, it's generally something we see as an average. The Commonwealth of Virginia Department of Education shows pre-K or kindergarten and 1st grade averaging about 18 students per class. 2nd and 3rd doing about 20, 22, and then up to 24 in the 4th and 5th grades. So we just take an average of 22. Actually, in some cases, I think you have, varying levels or varying numbers in each classroom, depending on the school itself and what the particular program is. But 22 is the way we would assess the seat capacity in a general classroom.
And obviously we're in a much different time period with everything that's going on right now.
Sure.
The distancing and all like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm sure none of that was taken into account with this, but the other piece of it is, having been on the school board for a number of years, I think it's always been something that the school board has tried, not always been able to do, but especially your K through 2 grades, to keep those numbers relatively low to build that foundation. Has the school board or administration looked at capacity numbers based off of what you think is ideal for those classrooms and for those buildings? Because I'm thinking 22, while it's a state average, may be a little bit higher than what the school board may like it to be in Rockbridge.
Ideally, if we can keep them to around 17, that's ideal. But we have some school classrooms, some elementary classrooms are fewer than that, and many of them are more than that. But on average, we like to try and keep it there if we can.
I can just add one more thing about Central too. The way the cafeteria, the gym, that combination, even if we had considerably less number of students, I think that we'd still have some issues accommodating a smaller number with the space the way it's designed today.
Yeah, but Central, if for those who have not been in there, the gymnasium is also the cafeteria, is also the auditorium. So anytime we're having lunch in there, that cuts half of the gym out immediately. They do pull the wall out, and they have PE on the other side. But obviously, you know, and at right around 500 students, it's full. I would venture to say it's not overcrowded, but it's full. But to Wendy's point, that design of the cafeteria, auditorium, kitchen space makes it extremely difficult throughout all day long trying to get things done with respect to just eating or having physical education activities and those sorts of things too. It makes it tough.
Okay, so if we look then at the middle schools, so you can see here we have again the averages from the Virginia DOE shown at the top in larger print, and then you see the comparison with Maury River. So again here it looks like we have plenty of space at Maury River for what y'all are doing and what you might need to be doing in the future. So this is again a little bit of a sort of detail that Roger and Dr. Thompson were alluding to earlier with the maximum design capacity versus the functional capacity. So that functional capacity would be at that 85%. And you can see there that that's when we're reaching, you actually are going to have a reduced population projected in the middle school by 2029. Have a little bit of a blip. And then as we look at the high school, same situation here with the way that we're showing the projections. And here we've got a functional capacity at that 85% of just under 1,400 students. And since you're projected in 2029 to be just over 1,000 students, it again should accommodate what you need to do. But this is one where, as I was mentioning earlier, we recommend some changes based on programmatic function versus just capacity for this one, because this is an older building that was built around, you know, I think it was built in the early 90s, but it's really built on sort of an early 80s model of school. So it's definitely a dated model of school, and we'll get into that with our recommendations. Anybody have any questions? And this did not include the Career and Tech Center FSK.
So you're
So, sure.
I have one question. So you're saying that that Maury River is built on an 80s model?
No, that would be just Rockbridge County High School, the high school.
The high
Not
school. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And that really is,
Design
speaks to the issue of sort of how it's organized. It's very compact. It sort of began to respond to the energy crisis of the 70s. Compact, fewer windows, very tight circulation patterns and that sort of thing, which you know, may very well have worked in the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s, and we see it routinely. Today's high school environments are much more open. They try to support better circulation, more natural light, those kinds of things. So when we say 80s model, it's not a criticism as much as it is an observation of the kinds of high school designs that we were seeing come out of that period.
Exactly. So we can move on into the recommendations that we have given out as part of the report. So we have these sort of all facilities recommendations about continuing your maintenance protocols. You have a maintenance schedule that you're on, continuing that. You also have a mechanical system schedule, or I'm trying to think of the word,
Well, the
where your
upgrade,
son
yeah, the
upgrade. Thank you.
upgrades
The program that you have.
CIP, I guess.
Yeah. So just continuing that on your current schedule. What I was alluding to earlier with being able to repurpose existing space to support changing pedagogies without major construction projects, we think is definitely possible within your schools that have, that are so far under their functional capacity. A lot of the schools, especially when we are doing our safety and security analysis portion, could use some additional modifications for both internal visibility and access, as well as external visibility and access. So having better sight lines, better natural light, better visibility for passive monitoring, both indoors and outdoors. Continue the incorporation of your project-based learning model, which you are doing really well, but don't have necessarily the spaces that support that as easily as it could. So potentially some of the spaces that, number 3 alludes to changing pedagogies and changing spaces to support those. Some of these could support project-based learning and other kind of shared spaces versus owned spaces. So a lot of times in current and near future thinking, we're talking about more of a student-centric model, both of education as well as of facility design, and focusing on the students rather than focusing on the adults. And then continue drive towards interdisciplinary learning. So having those sort of shared spaces that allow multiple disciplines to use them together. And then indoor and outdoor spaces as well for those interdisciplinary learning spaces. And then we have some additional recommendations that I'll talk through for Natural Bridge, Central Elementary, and then Rockbridge County with Floyd K.
Yeah, and I
Does
would just
anybody
like
have questions about these?
I just want to sort of emphasize something Aaron was talking about in terms of the continued maintenance protocols. You all have done a great job, frankly, of taking care of buildings that, grew out of the 50s and 60s and so forth. And you've done a good job in, at least, frankly, 5 of the facilities in finding ways to upgrade those over the last 10 to 15 years. The things that have been done worked well to create the kind of environments that we like to see more of, and get a good foundation for it. So I think you've done a lot of things right over the last 10 to 15 years. And I think that's something you're also able to take care of these facilities because of the quality of the investments you've made. The single most difficult one, of course, is the high school. And I think that's what Aaron's getting ready to kind of move into with a couple of other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think definitely throughout our findings, as I said at the beginning, we really were impressed with the way that the system is run and the way that you all take care of your facilities, your administrators, your teachers, and your students.
Yeah.
It's very impressive. So when we're looking at Natural Bridge, in addition to those, sort of recommendations for every school, we saw that one of the largest needs that they had was an appropriate art and maker space. So what I mentioned earlier about your elementary schools often having their art class on the stage, which just, isn't necessarily a great space for art learning and making, but it also limits the amount of use the stage can get for presentation or other kinds of things that the students should also be working on. So it takes up one space that could be used for something that it's not that good at.
I think the other thing, Aaron, is in addition to stages being used for things like art and music, in some cases, they're on carts. And that means that you've got sort of an itinerant approach to the facilitator coming into a room, and all of the things that sort of make that more difficult and less desirable, giving the kids a change, and the teachers for that matter, their own spaces in order to really support those arts programs is critical.
Definitely. So some potential solutions. One, because this school does have additional space in its functional capacity, you could reclaim the original art room and shift around some of the other spaces to make that an easy switch back to just using what was originally planned as the art room, which does have the built-in storage and natural light that you need for that type of work, and then shift around some of your other classes to do that. Another option is there is an unused lower level under the stage that is a partial basement, so it does have windows. And it was the former locker rooms, which is now basically just being used for storage, but it's not very good storage space because it's got all of the showers and things like that still left there. And so there's potential to reclaim that space that's not being used at all to make into a multi-purpose art and maker space that the school could use. And through that, we would want to improve the connection, or we would suggest improving the connection to the exterior for the kids to be able to go back and forth outside as well to do artwork and making outside. Any questions about that one? So this is for Central Elementary. So when we look at Central, we have on the left, I show the largest needs and issues that we found. And then on the right, the recommended solutions. So we'll just really quickly go through these, and then we can show you some of our recommendations or suggestions. The interior just has some outdated finishes that need some refreshment now and also on a regular schedule. There is an outdated mechanical system, but that is on the schedule to be renovated as well. So we suggest moving forward with that. That's causing some comfort issues as well as some energy issues in the school. The site drainage is very poor, and there has been a lot of runoff and erosion outside of the building, which has affected a lot of the play areas outside, as well as been a bear for site maintenance. So we think that you could easily correct the site drainage with some proper grading and drainage techniques, and you could relocate play areas as well as incorporate outdoor learning areas through this modification. I think Wendy mentioned earlier the cafeteria, auditorium, gym is a shared space. Which often works in elementary schools, but the way that Central is reaching that capacity, they are having a little bit of problems with conflict. So there is, if we increase the number of spaces that would accommodate these three functions, it would not only help each of them to perform better, but also it would make better utilization of the space that you have. So we're going to suggest that you add a gymnasium / multi-purpose space to improve the utilization of your existing space for the cafeteria. The former art and music spaces have changed to either general education or special education to accommodate that growth that you've had at Central. And so now, as Roger was just mentioning, art and music are taught on a cart in spaces that weren't designed for these programs. And so we're going to suggest to add art and music classrooms with their relative support spaces. I think because of the growth that you've seen at Central, former storage rooms, closets, things like that have been taken over for your support staff, such as your TDT counselors, your standard counselors, et cetera, which not only reduces the storage space that you have, but it also is not the best environment for those professionals to work in. So teacher collaboration space on top of that speaking of professional work environment, has been taken over for the STEM and maker classroom, which it's great that you've incorporated that kind of space, but now there's no place for teachers to collaborate. And we know that that's a really important part of their professional development, as well as how much it affects the students in their learning. So we're suggesting to add a STEM makerspace to accommodate these newer pedagogies, and as well as flexibility for increased enrollment. And that would allow you to reinstall the teacher collaboration space, as well as a flex office and meeting space. So we'll look at what those might look like. This is a very rough sketch. This one is a little bit more detailed than you'll see for our high school suggestions, because we did have a lot of programming sort of discussions, but in general, all these recommendations are ones that are very early stage, and should you move forward with any of these projects, you would definitely want to start at the beginning and start with programming to make sure that you are using your dollars in the best way and building what's perfect for that site. So let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. I don't know how big everybody's screens are, but I'm sure they don't need all that access. So hopefully everybody can sort of see. This is the floor plan of the first floor of Central Elementary School. So if you're familiar with the site, you drive in here around the loop for drop off, and this is where the large awning is. So this is the main entrance right here. So this light pink color is the cafetorium. What we would suggest is that you take the gym and auditorium functions out of that space and relocate them to this gym and auditorium and arts addition over to the right. So that would allow you to have a gym and an auditorium combined, since those functions are less often overlapping or better able to overlap through the day. And then have the cafeteria in place here with some expanded storage where the stage used to be, to accommodate some of the missing storage that you've had to take over elsewhere. Having the cafeteria as a sole cafeteria would also allow you to use this as a flex space during non-lunch time, so that classes could move into there for interdisciplinary learning, co-teaching experiences, project-based learning and making. It allows that to be used as a learning space and not just an eating space. And so we think that would be beneficial to the school without having to add on a lot of more classrooms or something. And then what we're suggesting over here is an art and music classroom, as well as the gym and auditorium that I mentioned before, with designated storage. Outside, correcting the drainage and relocating the paved play area, creating an outdoor classroom, a learning terrace, something like that, that the students could go outside to learn. And then having your playground relocated so that you can accommodate all of these things in one place. And I'll quickly go to the upstairs before questions. In this concept diagram, you see on the upper level, the idea to return the current STEM classroom back to the teacher collaboration space that it once was, to allow for that interdisciplinary learning to be more appropriately planned. And then having an office in there that's a flex office for those traveling counselors, TDT counselors, or one-on-one meetings that might need to take place. And then above the arts area below, we suggest having a maker STEM classroom, which would have some small group rooms off of it. So this is a flexible learning space that would allow for lots of different types of learning to take place, and would help with having more of these flex spaces help to relieve some of your classrooms as well. Does anyone have any questions?
The quick question, Aaron. I know that the drainage issue has been, it's been an issue since my kids were at Central, and that's been quite a while ago. Can you quickly explain what you envision the solution being to that drainage situation?
Sure. Roger, you want to answer that question?
Sure, yeah. Well, you're familiar with the situation in that there's, I guess there's an outfall of the building sewer that comes out and it's actually exposed up close to the building. And then because of the drainage and the way that all of that area in there is shaped, it's essentially bare dirt. And the problem obviously is with the bare dirt, it's going to continue to erode over time. Because of the way we think it could be reshaped, we could see that as a terraced type of plaza area that would have, say, an amphitheater kind of thing for students, classes to gather, an area for even potentially outdoor for artwork there. Although we've also proposed artwork or an art patio, if you will, outside the new art room. This also would be a place that could accommodate even potentially, whole grade gatherings or multi-grade gatherings. But again, terraced, hardscaped, pavers, planters, those kinds of things that would stabilize the conditions that are out there and cover up the sewer line that sort of gets exposed because of the erosion and so forth. And then make sure that we've got capture structures and so forth for water that does come down, that does go across the new areas and so forth, that is correctly sized and positioned to take the water off of the site the way it should be done.
What's the additional square footage of the added space at Central?
I think we'll get to that in
Is that coming?
yeah, I think they're coming with some scenarios for cost.
Do you want me to share the cost scenarios today? I can pull that up. Because I think I have us jumping. Oh, right before we get to that, I'll share with you some of the visuals that sort of accompany these new spaces. So some ideas of what those art and music spaces might look like, including outdoor learning like you see here. So again, spaces that are built specifically for this purpose. Physical education potential spaces that incorporate the stage area and also incorporate different kinds of full, lifelong fitness concepts as well. Make PE fun. We also had that open stair connection in the new addition. And these are some visuals of what that can be like. We recommend making any space that you create a learning space. It just really maximizes your dollars spent, and allowing these kind of open stair connections, as you can see, give you space for breakout, tutoring, small group exercises, or just kind of hangout spaces for that social learning. And then the maker, STEM, and small group space. These are some sort of spirit images of what that might look like. Just showing you that this would be an open space, but have enclosed or semi-enclosed spaces as well to allow for, again, small groups, one-on-one. You see in the lower right corner, that spot for the individual learning as well.
Well, I think the other thing that those spirit images reinforce, and Aaron, you may have said this, is the importance of furniture in today's learning environment, being what can be flexible, can be changed for different kinds of uses, give students choices, and really become more engaging spaces and more flexible spaces. And what we have found is that the investment in furniture can often be a more cost-effective way than actually doing new construction. So when you start to look at repurposing some of the classroom spaces in any of your buildings, you might want to start with just functionally looking at how the furniture works and what it can support. It's a cheaper way to make an effect.
Definitely. I am pulling up the cost information.
And I'm sorry, I don't remember the square footages right now, but I think it's pretty well defined in the scenarios.
It is. Okay, so let me pull this over. All right, so is everyone seeing the project cost scenario for Central?
Can you enlarge that, Aaron? Somehow? There you go.
Yep. So what we're showing is a combination of renovations and additions in this project cost scenario. So that shows you that the renovation budget accommodates, that's things like new finishes, new lighting, new ceilings. And then the additions, the auxiliary gym, art and music, we're showing right just under 13,000 square feet. And the STEM suite has a typo and it's missing its data, but I think it's about 1,000 square feet on top of that.
3,000.
I guess we could do the math, 3,000 square feet on top of that. So that gives you a potential construction cost, including the site improvements, which we have a lump sum shown of just over almost 5.1 million.
And that gives
that
you
doesn't
the square
include your-
footage of about 15,750 for new construction.
That's right. And that doesn't include the furniture that Roger was just alluding to, as well as any soft costs with fees and inspections and surveys. And it doesn't include a contingency, which we always recommend. So with all of that, based on a summer 2021 bidding, which is the closest projection we have right now, 6.4 million would be the project cost estimate for that, assuming that you move forward with this type of environment that we've shown in both the spirit images as well as the footprint plans that we shared. Okay. And so, any more questions on Central before we move on to the high school? All right, we've got about 12 minutes left to get through the high school. So for Rockbridge County and Floyd K, we combined the two. And you can see here, we also have some prioritized recommendations from our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers, and what they prioritized as recommendations as well. So the biggest things are the layout, as we discussed before, based on an older model, not necessarily the current pedagogies are not necessarily supported well here, along with that understanding of student ownership of spaces that I was speaking about earlier. So we think you could reorganize a lot of the spaces to accommodate these new learning environment theories. Outdated finishes need refreshment, lighting and electrical systems need updating. The entry sequence at the high school, if most of you have been there, you know that it has a very tight entrance corridor, and that, along with other tight corridors, a lack of natural light and views. Roger noted earlier, it's a very compact, energy efficient model from the old ways of considering energy efficiency. And so it's dark and doesn't have a lot of visibility between spaces or to the outside. So considering learning, visibility, and security in the upgrades that we do. The physical education facilities are not adequate for the programs and not comparable to other guidelines or the current guidelines for other high schools that probably you compete with. Specific to FSK, there are some updates to curriculum offerings that could accommodate some newer career and technical education. It also needs a new roof or repair of a roof as recommended, upgrades to its building system, and then it is very understated in its identity from the exterior, and specifically with newer career and technical education, incorporating a lot of community and business involvement, having an identity for that space that would allow for a community or business member to come directly there would be ideal, as well as allowing the students that are taking classes in there to really feel some pride and ownership in their building with a new sort of front door and identity. So if we look at the sketch here of the high school, all of the gray areas are recommended for moderate renovation, some moving of walls a little bit, some refreshment of finishes, and then all of the electrical, et cetera, upgrades that we mentioned already. So this really showcases some more intense modifications that we would suggest. We'll start here with the light yellow. We suggest a new administrative suite addition, as well as the entry vestibule that coincides with that, and the new SRO office, having an addition with a lot of visibility at the front door would allow for a little bit more breathing room for your administration and counseling, because we would suggest then that the former administration suite change to accommodate the counseling suite right here. Hopefully y'all can see my mouse. And then we suggest, this is that sort of choked corridor that I referenced earlier, recommend opening that up so that when the students come through, that tight space is really just asking for conflict in the corridor. That's a lot of students going through a tight space. So we recommend opening that up as part of the renovation, and then this dark green adding some new toilets, new group toilets or multi-fixture toilets that would accommodate something in the auditorium, something in the gym as well as the rest of the school. As you continue through the athletics area, suggesting a new auxiliary gym addition here is a possible spot for it. That creates a sort of semi-enclosed courtyard here that we think could benefit both the auxiliary gym as well as the library and the dining commons, as sort of a shared courtyard here. And then as you move through the library, to what we would suggest is taking some of the classrooms to combine them into a larger space for a maker lab or project-based learning lab, shown here in red. And that could be potentially a semi-open space that really connects and joins the library, which could be more of a hub for the students, to what we suggest is infilling in the very underused courtyard that you have now, an atrium-like space that would allow a student commons or forum space for a lot more of those student groups to break out, or even sort of impromptu performances, casual learning, casual presentations, things like that, some of those more modern learning techniques. This we would suggest being something with incorporated natural light. So maybe it has some skylights or clear story windows or something, so that you don't create a windowless space or lack of natural light for all of these classrooms that are in there right now. So we move through that area, and we would suggest this potentially having a large stepped stair connecting to the second level as well. so that that would create kind of a really heart space for the school for the students. As we continuing to more student-owned spaces, the renovated dining commons with the potential expansion, which could be indoors, it could be a pavilion outdoors. And then additionally, the added teacher dining and senior dining, because we are suggesting taking over what you currently have for teacher dining to move your culinary arts program so that it has an adjacency to your kitchen. A lot of times incorporating real life learning experiences and seeing the career that they're actually studying is really helpful. So we think this could be beneficial to have the culinary arts program next to the kitchen and serving area, as well as the dining commons, so that potentially you could have functions that are served by the student. And then relocating the classroom that accompanies that lab. And that would require a new classroom addition for the agriculture lab that's out here, since we would displace that. If we keep going sort of around the circle to the other portion of career and technical education, where we've just placed where we've moved the culinary arts program from its current space here, this has potential to be any kind of lab space. Maybe it's a CNA lab, maybe it's a new kind of classroom lab space that for a career program that you know you need and you don't have yet. So that could be a new lab space, as well as next to that, an expanded online classroom for online learning. We would also suggest having a new entrance added to the technical center. As I was mentioning before, I think this would draw an identity to this, give an identity to the school, as well as allow for spaces. As part of this, we could have small group spaces, meeting spaces, and things like that, where community and business members could come meet with students that they're mentoring or things like that, incorporated into this. And it sort of maybe has a professional environment to it. And then the last thing that we suggest here is taking over a couple of other classrooms for a maker lab that has some small group spaces off of it and then connects to an outdoor learning terrace. So incorporating some of that outdoor learning space, as well as some flexible project-based learning and passion-based learning spaces. The only thing that we really have on the second floor, most of it is renovation, but some of it is the top level of that infill of the courtyard that could take the courtyard to a student commons forum space with some stairs here. Site-wise recommendation, yeah.
Just a quick
Sure.
comment on that, because we overemphasize sometimes the need to have natural light. And by capturing that indoor sort of interior courtyard and creating an interior building space, we run the potential of losing some of that natural light. So the idea would be that would probably want to pop up higher than the second floor and be ringed by glass to get natural light still coming down into that sort of atrium space, if you will, and keeping natural light filtering into those adjacent corridors and the classrooms that are bordering it.
So site-wise recommendations for the athletic fields, replacing the athletic fields with artificial turf in the athletic stadium, adding a new 2-story field house adjacent to the athletic stadium, and then which the upper level could have weight training and team rooms and offices, and on the lower room, team rooms, restrooms, laundry, things like that. Coming over here, adding a pedestrian island, which would lose you some parking spaces, but would increase your safety back and forth to the athletics restroom concession building over here, as well as the tennis courts, of which we suggest adding 3 tennis courts to get you more to an equal level with your competitor schools. So going through a few spirit image pages for these, those sort of student-owned spaces we've been talking a lot about through all the renovation of Rockbridge, suggesting that these get incorporated. All but the lower right space actually is a very similar footprint high school that we've recently renovated, and we're able to incorporate those throughout the school. Maker and STEM spaces incorporated. Some of them might look somewhat like this. Space for that student project-based and passion-based learning, student-led learning. Commons and gathering spaces and stairs. So this kind of idea of that gathering stair that you see here in the lower right that we were talking about in that commons atrium, or even on the left, this blue stair, really literally, or not literally, but it really electrifies that heart space of the school. And that's, the real student-owned zone going up and down. Dining facilities, increasing outdoor dining, increasing the natural light in there, and increasing the choice of type of dining space just through furniture. And then career and tech, just making sure that the new spaces are incorporating the most appropriate programs and the most up-to-date facilities for the programs that you already have. Exterior and entry improvements, including things that showcase this is the front door and draw you to the school, as well as on the lower side, you can see the increased visibility that you can get from these kind of spaces and the security that comes with that, as well as a security vestibule. Athletics, potential for field houses and fitness spaces. And this showcases the levels of renovation that we foresee. So you can see the light green would be, and this doesn't include the additions and the major things that we spoke about earlier, or the additions that we spoke about earlier, just for renovation. Light renovation, moderate renovation, and heavy renovation. And the heavy renovation typically is based around a lot of mechanical, plumbing, and electrical changes that would need to happen. And then on the upper level, the moderate renovation areas, again, that's based on the fact that that's science labs needing to be updated. And I can pull over, I've got my other thing going with the report view. And let me just really quickly zoom to the high school page. So we've got the project cost scenario for the high school here. And again, you can see down here in the lower right, the renovation levels description. So you can see we're looking at renovations light, moderate, and heavy, a certain number of square footages based on that diagram that I just shared. Let me see if I can zoom in at all. Hopefully you can read that. Try not to make everyone dizzy. Additions shown here with the main entrance addition being approximately 5,400 square feet, dining commons addition 2,200 square feet, an auxiliary gym would be 11,000 square feet, and then the courtyard infill about 7,000. So you've got approximately just under 26,000 square feet. And then you have your athletic improvements listed below, site and athletic improvements. So probable construction costs for all of those suggestions and recommendations would bring you to approximately $33 million, not including the furniture and fixtures, soft costs, or contingency. So the project budget based on summer 2021 bidding, we would estimate at approximately $42 million for renovation. And Charles, Charles, are you still on? Oh yeah, there you are. You and Roger had worked up a comparison to what a new high school would be. Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure, I can do that. You know, a comparable high school of around 200,000 square feet, just the building itself, and variable amount of career and technical things like, you know, auto shops and stuff like that aren't that inexpensive. So those are the kind of things you would be a variable, but essentially a new building right now, and just the building itself is around $55 to $60 million, depending, you know, if you started from scratch. So there's some local precedents in the Valley area that are under construction right now that are in that ballpark range. So another component of a new high school, is the amount of site work, you know, with athletics and parking and all the other things that come along with that. So it's a fairly significant number for site development that could be anywhere from $15 to $20 million. So a new high school is a big endeavor, and we have some additional information on that if anybody wants to discuss it.
Charles, I just want to clarify. So if you're talking about a comparable building, would that be more like 70 to 80 million dollars total, all in?
Mm-hmm. Well, for instance, the new high school at Harrisonburg City, they are building a roughly 200,000 square foot high school, and I don't know all the details about it, but the price that they're working under right now for construction is 83 million on a brand new site.
Okay.
So I mean, that again, these are real kind of big numbers. It all depends on, you know, because they're building athletic stadium as a part of that, and parking and all kinds of other things. So it's a full high school project.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Roger, you're muted.
Yeah, now I'm not, I hope.
Okay.
I've often
No, you're
been
good.
told to mute myself, but in different ways. The unknown to do a comparison with new construction is if you do have to go to a new site, which assuming you do find a new site, it's hard to know what the cost of the site would be. That's in addition to the numbers that you're going to see in the construction contract. Potentially, a new site may require all the utilities to be run to it from city and county systems, but also potential for road improvements, which have nothing to do with the educational demands. So that's the unknown. We can sort of confine it to the boundaries of a site and say, here's a building, it needs to be this size to accommodate, and you wouldn't build a necessarily 1,000 student school, you'd probably build a 1,250 student school to accommodate any kind of changes as you go along. So yeah, I mean, those are numbers that, as Charles said, you know, roughly you could be looking at a project cost of somewhere close to $100 million. So that's just for comparative purposes, to give you a sense. Now, we've said back in the study that we feel like the high school has some good bones. And what that means is that we can strip away some of the facade, so to speak, the flesh, the visible parts, open things up and renew the finishes and so forth, and recreate or create a place that I think is more inspiring, more welcoming, and more engaging to the students and the faculty and the staff who spend more time there than anybody else does.
We think you could really meet your goals with a renovation. and not needing to do the new high school.
Can I ask you a question? This is Leslie Ayers here.
Hi.
Would this renovated high school, would that have a capacity of 1,250? Or would it still have a capacity of 1,000?
Oh, we think it'll have a capacity of 1,250 plus.
Okay.
Because it's got more footprint.
Oh,
Hey,
apologies.
that's okay. That was entertaining.
Yeah.
It was the deal too is that you know, if you just take strictly seat space, you know, the current school, I think we estimated was probably capable of 1,500 students. You don't want to use it that way, I can tell you that, because it would create bigger problems than the squeeze downs in the corridors. I mean, it would be a conflicting place and overcrowded and difficult to program. But yes, the end result of a renovation, and this is a major renovation project and addition project, would be to accommodate not only your current and projected enrollment, but give you some latitude to move. You know.
Oops, you went out, Roger, or at least for me.
I can hear him.
Yeah, good.
Did his
Well,
sound go out for y'all?
That's really all
No.
that matters. Is nobody really wants to listen.
Can I ask one other question? This new, the renovated, will it have solar capacity? Solar energy capacity, solar panels?
I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. You know, you have a low slope, quote, flat roof on the building now. With the new legislation that just got passed a couple of months ago, there's a lot more opportunity for solar panels on school projects right now. And if you're aware of what's going on with that, but there's a lot of the organizations can do that as a separate project straight with the school system versus having. We would recommend doing it that way because it's a lot easier and a lot more economical that way versus you buying, you know, the school buying the panels themselves.
Yeah,
No, but I meant does the roof have capacity, or are you saying that this should just be adjacent? I mean, I would hate to be building a school that's supposed to last us for 30 years, but yet it's still using, you know, it's stuck 30 years in the past in terms of its energy consumption.
I don't know if we've got the roof. We didn't do an analysis of this, but I'm not sure if we have quite enough roof area to cover the needs electrically, but that's something we could take a look at.
Yeah, we would suggest that be a part of the analysis of sort of an integrated, comprehensive look at the energy using systems. I think beyond, you know, do you have the floor space or the roof space to accommodate the right number of collectors to convert to the right amount of energy to operate the building? Probably not, but there's no reason that you can't do at least something that would offset those things and be a demonstration project for students and show an environment that takes advantage of that sort of resource, renewable resource.
Good.
Good question. Good question.
If I may, I have a couple of questions for you. Did you give us the dollar figure for the Natural Bridge renovation? I may have missed that.
We did. We just haven't shown it to you.
Okay.
So
it's in the report. I can pull it up while y'all are talking.
It's actually a pretty small number.
Yeah.
I think it's under 100,000 or so.
Yeah, 45,000.
Yeah.
Thank you. And did with the renovations to like the high school, how long, what's the lifespan of that? Or how do you project how long those renovations should last?
Charles, you want to respond to that?
Right now the building is, 30 plus years old, and we're most of what we would be keeping, is basically the structure of the shell, and a lot of the interior walls, with some minor modifications, I guess. But, I think 20 years is probably the 20 to 30 year, another 20 to 30 years is probably a viable, look ahead. I mean, we've got some projects. We just finished a significant renovation, in Spotsylvania to a high school very similar, that the renovations that we did, provided the flexibility to address the changes that we can foresee right now, in terms of pedagogy and that kind of thing, providing more flexibility for student choice and, things as programs change and flex. They have a lot of flexibility in terms of how they operate. But again, building mechanical systems and those kind of things, they just have a certain life to them, and every 30 years or so is the time frame for replacing a lot of that. It gets worn out over time. So
yeah, and I would underscore that the things that we would do would be aimed at, from a functional standpoint, being able to adapt over time to different changes in programs, different kinds of things that students will be doing, and different ways of learning, as opposed to the sort of the more rigid bells and cells, typical old classroom. That's the kind of thing that you try to get out of the way as much as possible. And those are the things that can extend the life and the usefulness of a facility. As Charles said, 1993 is not that long ago. A lot of communities look at buildings that they built in 1993 as the new high school. And so that's why we feel like the bones are there that give us the ability to strip away some of the things that are in the way. Charles said 20 years. 20 years is a good estimate, I think, of systems, building systems, and their longevity with the right kind of maintenance and so forth over time. And quite honestly, you'll want to continue to upgrade those anyway, because the efficiencies become greater and greater as time goes by. The building itself, I think, could continue to operate on into the future beyond that a good bit, with continued sort of revisiting of things and making sure you tweak it. It's not like you've got a 1930s building that's falling down. It's just not what it needs to be to support the kind of learning experience that you want your students to have and your community to have.
Understood. I just wouldn't want to do some sort of 30-year financing and building only lasts for 20, and then you're stuck with a building not useful and still have debt owed on it.
Absolutely.
And what type
Definitely.
of timeline are you talking about as far as, start to finish of a project like this? And how would, that work with students being in the building, or would the schools have to make some other arrangements or whatnot?
Charles, you're a star at this enabling activity.
Oh, that, obviously we hadn't thought too much about the phasing, but the project that I just mentioned was a fully occupied high school that, I think there were maybe 6 or 7 modular units placed on the site.
There were
What?
20.
Okay, there were 20 then.
Yeah.
All right. I'm
And
confusing
there
it
were
with another one.
1,200 students.
Right. So it was a fully occupied high school, renovated it while it was occupied. So I know it's possible, and that project took about 18 months, 20 months.
Yeah.
For construction. The planning took about 12, 14. It depends on how much time it takes to kind of work through some of the programming, getting those kind of elements right. But I would say this is a 3-year project, start to finish.
Yeah. The 18 months or so, 18 to 20 months, I think we started construction in March and finished a final partial phase in November of the next year.
Mhm.
So we had 2 summers.
Right. And so the key to that is you want to pay attention very closely with the administration of the school on how do you minimize the impact of the students and faculty, number one, and then maximizing the work areas for contractors so you're not breaking it up into 1,000 pieces, and that really costs money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of balance those two things together, and working very closely with the administration is a key to the success of that kind of thing.
There are some benefits to the phasing during operation, though, with like we mentioned earlier, the students being able to learn from the project while it's going on. We've also done things like test out furniture in the existing spaces while the new spaces are getting built and things like that. So there are some benefits to doing it while you're operational.
And I think what we found to be the right approach, at least in that most recent work, was to take, say, half of the building on 2 floors and hand that over for renovations and additions. And the first phase, and then in the second phase, flip that. So that you don't have workmen over or under students as they continue to operate.
And kind of a sidebar, 2 questions. I constantly hear, not some from our schools, just because our students are the ones participating in activities, but also outside of the schools from our recreational departments and whatnot, that there's a severe lack of field and gym space in our county, especially for the Little League type. Was any of that taken into account of is there a lack of field and gym space? And if there is, where that could be located within the county to serve our students? Was any of that taken into account?
I think we took that into account at both Central and at the high school. What we observed for the most part with Mountain View and Natural Bridge and Fairfield were that there was adequate site there to accommodate certain athletic fields and so forth. And the enrollment capacity was so low that, or the enrollment was so low that you were able to really kind of use those blended spaces like that cafegimatorium potentially better. At Central, you got a sort of a double-edged sword there in that not only do you need more space because of demand, but you have a very limited site. So we didn't identify additional space at Central that would accommodate things like softball fields or baseball fields to improve that or access to it. It seems to me that you got a pretty good situation at Maury, but it may be that that's an area that we would revisit and take a look at what kind of demand should be placed and addressed maybe at Maury Middle School. At the high school, you're still suffering from a lack of space site-wise. So we really were giving you more support facilities. With an auxiliary gym addition at the high school, we think you open up both from a community use standpoint and also from a physical education standpoint. You add to it, additional tennis courts, a better use for the stadium in terms of field house and that sort of thing. But no, I would say that we did not get too deeply into adding play fields or competition fields. And it's something that we would recommend as you go into the stages of programming, final programming and final scoping of these projects.
And as you alluded to, I think when you were going over the elementaries, you know, there has been recent renovations done at those facilities. I believe circa 2000 to 2006 area, so 15 to 20 years ago. When you were doing your assessment and study, could you tell how, or did you even look at the money that was spent there and the investment that we got out of it, how we've been able to use that, and kind of what our return on investment has been? Because obviously, you know, all of it's a lot of money, and you want to make sure that you're getting the most that you can out of it. I was just trying to gauge, you know, how the system has done with the renovations that have been done to other buildings. You know, how's that been a return for the citizens of Rockbridge County?
I guess overall, my reaction is that the improvements that were made, and I think you're right, it started around 2004, 2005, and went through, I want to say, the early teens in terms of the improvements. I think the last one being maybe Maury Middle School. The earlier ones, Fairfield was a little more aggressive. And certainly the work that was done in Mountain View was beneficial with adding the gym and the cafeteria and that sort of thing, and improving the appearance somewhat. Natural Bridge was a little bit more limited, although it was a 2-story space with classrooms and a library and that sort of thing. So, and then as you get to as I said, Fairfield was a little bit more extensive. All of those in our thinking, and we spoke to the administrators and faculty in some of in these locations about how that renovation was still holding up in terms of the appearance being still modern, still current, still contemporary in its approach and engaging. So I would suggest that what you got was pretty good bang for your buck. How that works from, and it's still functional as well, I guess is the better way to answer. There are finishes, you know, it's dated, a little bit dated. There needs to be some improvements in finishes. And we see that as something that's routinely done on a 7 to 10 year rotation in many communities. Every 7 to 10 years, they're gonna refinish, so to speak. New finishes for floors and walls and paint, ceilings, lighting, etc. But I think that the bones, again, are still very good there. And some of the themes that were used in those buildings and that design, I think, engaged the students' imagination still. So I think you did a good job. I think you also got a pretty good result. The mechanical systems, they need to be addressed. There's changes in the energy code. There's changes in the way buildings are used. Humidity levels are a challenge. Now, many of what we looked at was during the summer when the systems were backed down. And I think those are some things you just have to look at and improve on. And that seems to be on your CIP.
David, this is Kathy Brandt. Just a thought about the athletics in particular. You know, we've been talking about lightings and fields and auxiliary gyms and things, I think almost since the school was built. But one thing that to keep in mind is the high school is oftentimes they're asking others to use their space. So for instance, you know, wrestling over at Moore River Middle School's cafeteria, they'll just give that one as an example. So if you think about if we do build that auxiliary gym, we light those softball and baseball fields, that improves the timing allowed to use the fields, because right now we're limited to, you know, dawn to dusk and that's about it.
Yeah.
So I think overall, just in terms of athletics, that question that you had, I think it'll reduce the high school's need to go elsewhere, and plus allowing others to use our space as well.
Absolutely. And I think if you look at the project cost scenario for the high school that's still up there, you'll see under site and athletic improvements next to the bottom line, site lighting at the athletic fields. That was a discussion that we understood that was really pretty important. I think the other thing that will extend the usefulness or the accessibility to those facilities, particularly the stadium itself, is using an artificial turf. Because what that does is it takes any pressure off practice fields. You don't really have to have practice fields because you can play on an artificial turf field every day. So there are improvements in this that I think would speak to the concerns that are raised and the inconvenience, if you will, that says we've got to go over and borrow the facility over here or there. And I would say also that on the auxiliary gym at the high school, you'll see that as an 11,000 square foot addition, roughly 11,000. The intent there would be to accommodate seating. And I think I had put something in there at some point, seating for a couple hundred people. So it's a little more than your basic auxiliary gym. So there'd be some bleachers and so forth in there. There would also be restroom facilities that would allow that to be independent from the rest of the building after hours. So it is a community use facility as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, have we got your mic back up?
It's here, I think.
There you go.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what happened to my phone before, but I'm back. Does anybody have any questions before we close up? Thank you all for all of your participation and help with everything through the process. And Dr. Thompson has our report, and we can certainly share the presentation from tonight as well.
Aaron, that would be great if you could send me a copy of it. We'll make sure this gets out to all the parties here, the Lexington City folks who are joining us as well, so they can have it to review also. It'd be great.
Absolutely.
And I could echo David's thanks for all your work. We really appreciate all that you've done. It's been great to work with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And your team as well.
Definitely.
All right. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate you taking the time for us.
Yes.
See ya.
Thanks, y'all. Have a
Stay
good night.
safe. Keep doing the good job you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
That's right.
Take care.
Hey, before we continue, I just want to, I don't know where you are. It looks like, I don't know if that's actually Dan's background. He's got much better weather than we do here at Effinger, if that's a live shot back there. We're getting hammered, and some folks are getting bumped off the internet. So we'll try to get through this next part fairly quickly if you guys are all right with that. And if we get bumped off, apologies in advance. Madam Chair or Dr. Lyons, I don't know if you guys want me just to move into the next section there. Or...
That'd be great. Thank you very much, Philip.
Awesome.
Yeah, if we can talk about Rio.
Yes. I'm going to try to share my screen here momentarily. I do have a PowerPoint. I'm going to move through it pretty quickly. I'm hopeful that most of you have heard some of what this is entailing, since I presented this to the school board last Tuesday night, so a little over a week ago, and it's been out there in the public quite a bit. But I'm going to go through a similar presentation. It's not quite as long, not quite as detailed, and then happy to try and answer any questions you may have afterwards. All right, is my screen visible to you there? Great, thank you. All right, so this is our continuity of learning plan. It is a framework, a broad-based plan that we put together to hand down primarily to our principals, because we knew any plan we came up with respect to a broad plan was going to have to be tweaked and made more specific to meet the individual needs of each school. So once this was approved, our principals went to work with this and started to fill in the gaps, if you will, and figure out how are we going to work within this framework to make the day-to-day operations work within each individual school. And they're working on that now, and actually at this point pushing some of that information out to teachers and parents and families. Okay, so obviously this year is going to be one of the most challenging school years ever, I think, that any of us probably have ever dealt with. There have been some challenging years out there, but I don't know too many of us that have lived through a pandemic, certainly not tried to educate students in the midst of a pandemic. There's plenty of challenges out there for all of us, students, educators, parents, and communities as well. The first step our school board took was back on June 17 when we recognized that honestly, we needed some time to be able to prepare our teachers and give them opportunity to prepare and set them up for success. Without them being ready, it's pretty difficult to ask them to take on these challenges of educating kids in this new environment. So we did bump it back about 3 weeks. The first student day right now is August 31. And that will allow us, as I said, more preparation time, certainly teacher professional development, teacher collaboration. I think teachers are going to have to lean on each other more and more than ever. We had a lot of teacher collaboration in the past, but this year, simply because so much of this is new, our teachers are going to have to rely on each other's strengths and try to work together as much as possible. Gathering of personal protective equipment and appropriate cleaning supplies, and further continued deep cleaning of our schools throughout the summer here. Feel free to jump in and ask any questions as we go through if you'd like. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Just one question. The first day is the 31st.
Yes, sir. Student day.
How does that affect the end of the school year?
It doesn't at this point. We're going to apply for a waiver. Right now, we're within the 990 hours, but we're going to apply for a waiver to make sure that none of that affects us necessarily.
But don't you think we need those extra days? I mean, we shorted the kids this previous year. They're going to have to go through a remediation. I think put a lot of pressure on the teachers. You take 15 days away from them.
Well, and again, with what we're trying to do with the 15 days and trying to prepare them to set them up for success, there may be a need for that. We're going to go back and look at all the kids. We're going to run a 2-week minimum program at the beginning of the school year to try and fill in any gaps that were missed last year. We're going to assess them to make sure that any gaps that are there, we're going to try to come back even further and make sure that we get them caught up as best we can. Is that going to be the best case scenario for all students? I certainly don't think so. But it's going to help get a long way to where we are to make sure we know what gaps are there and the teachers can go back and try to fill them in. So with respect to obviously education, safety is always a priority. There's no doubt. But our motto is learning first in Rockbridge County. And I believe that wholeheartedly. However, right now, I think we have to make sure that safety is our top priority for our students and staff in every way possible. We're collaborating closely with the Virginia Department of Health and developing safety and health plans for our schools. Temperatures are going to be taken of students and staff when they enter the building. Social distancing, the gold standard of 6 feet will be maintained at all times whenever possible. That's in classrooms, hallway transitions, transportation, lunches, et cetera. And we're also in the process. We've got a lot of this information with respect to a lot of the questions are what happens if, what's going to happen if a student or a staff member is found positive with COVID. What are the next steps, sort of thing. We're getting a lot of that information. We're putting it into a format so we can let our school board take a look at it here very soon, but we don't quite have all that ready to roll out just yet. And obviously with the impact of, certainly students being out of school since March and teachers to a large degree also, families, it's a pretty upending scenario with respect to what we've been dealing with across all of our community for the past several months. So the mental health of our students and staff is also of utmost importance to us. And of course, after health and safety, teaching and learning has also got to be a top priority. How are we going to do this and try to effectively teach our kids, and again, a very new learning environment for most of our teachers. In accordance with all of the safety measures and working with the DOE and trying to keep our safe distancing and all those challenges that exist, we've at this point determined that the best option for providing students with academic success is a blended learning environment and a staggered schedule. Obviously, those are all our schools, and essentially all of our schools will be on a similar learning plan framework as of right now. I want to stipulate before I move too much further at this point. The plan that's presented, that I'm presenting to you tonight, is one that the board has already approved, but it is flexible. It is certainly dependent upon what's going to happen as we learn new information, because it seems to be coming out every day, whether it be health related or instructionally related, or what waivers may come out of DOE that allow us to do something differently. All of this is flexible, and that's not an easy thing to do, just to turn on a dime with something like this and make it happen. But if we need to tweak and if we need to change, we will certainly do that to make sure, again, we're being as safe as possible and hopefully providing the best education possible for our kids. So the plan that essentially all of our schools are going to be following, this is the bare bones framework, if you will. Student body from each of our schools will be divided into two groups, Team A and Team B. Each student will attend face-to-face learning for 2 days per week. Virtual learning will be the other 3 days per week. And teachers will hold office hours throughout the week to further communicate with students and families. That's a key element here with this. More than ever, I mean, we certainly emphasize communication with our families and students every year, but more than ever this year, it's going to be critical to make sure that our students have what they need, especially in those digital virtual learning environments, to make sure our families are being successful and being able to let their students attend whenever possible, whether it be face-to-face or in person. So communication is going to be key. The weekly instructional schedule, that's just a visual of what I just described. If you have two teams, Team A and Team B, you'll notice Team A will be in school on Monday and Thursday. They will be virtual the other 3 days. Team B will be in school on Tuesday and Friday. Sorry, I lost my place there. And then Wednesday, there will be no students in the building. It'll be a virtual day. That'll be a day that certainly there's a lot of teacher collaboration going on, student contact. It's a day when a lot of teachers and a lot of principals are setting up office hours for their teachers to reach out to make sure those connections are being made with students and families. Again, to make sure that they have what they need to be successful. If they have questions about assignments, that's a specific day. That will be happening throughout the course of the week entirely. Wednesday is not the only day that's going to happen, but those hours will be set aside specifically on Wednesday for that. Rockbridge County High School specifically, we're talking about all core and elective classes will be offered. Everything that's in the program of studies right now is what we're gonna offer. Extra safety measures for career and technical education classes. Obviously, that's a very hands-on environment in there. Kids sharing equipment, tools, whatever may happen. I mean, different type of personal protection equipment, the wiping down and sanitizing of tools if they're sharing sort of thing. Sharing is going to have to be limited. You know, the days of just passing the hammer back and forth, or the tool, the saw, or something or another. We obviously have to be a little more mindful of how we're doing those things that we've taken for granted for so long. So we're working on those types of plans as well. It may be recommended that some students with certain disabilities attend face-to-face more than 2 days a week. You know, in order to provide the equity for students who struggle, students who find school to be a little more challenging than others, we may ask them to come in more than 2 days a week, and certainly that could be the majority of them. We'll work through the IEP process to make sure we're doing that the right way and work with families and parents. And again, if the needs exist for individual students to come into the building more often than 2 times a week, we'll certainly make those accommodations. And then finally, families may choose to keep their children enrolled at RCHS and receive all digital virtual instruction. We obviously have some families that just aren't comfortable for various reasons to wanting to come back into the building at this point. It's understandable, and we're going to provide an opportunity for them to be able to remain at home. If they choose to do that, then we will provide virtual digital instruction to those families. Maury River, very similar, all core and elective classes. Same thing with CTE. Same thing with respect to students with disabilities. So we'll make that recommendation for those kids that that may need more than 2 days a week in the building. We want to be able to provide those services for them. And the same thing with respect to digital and virtual instruction there. Parents can elect for 100% at home. Our elementary schools, the general education curriculum will be offered. Music, PE, and library will be offered at least once per week. Art will be provided at least once per month. As you all are aware, we only have one art teacher for our 4 elementary schools. So we have to share quite a bit, but she'll get around at least once per month and hopefully a little more than that. This is a little different here with respect to students with disabilities. They'll be offered the opportunity to attend school face-to-face 4 days per week. We feel like we can go ahead and keep our safe distancing in place and bring our youngest students, our most needy students in 4 days per week with those disabilities to make sure that they don't get too far behind. These are critical years for these younger students, and we need to make sure that we can keep those that are find school most challenging, give them the services they need so they don't get too far behind. And then, of course, the same thing here with respect to if a family still feels they would like to have a 100% digital environment with respect to learning, we're going to provide that for our elementary schools as well. In our preschools, this is obviously this is a huge challenge because the curriculum is based primarily on play and social interaction, and it's obviously pretty difficult to practice social distancing and social interaction at the same time. So our teachers and our principals are going to have to be pretty creative in how we develop ways in which to do this, but they're committed to doing that. We'll make some significant modifications to make sure we follow the safety guidelines, and depending upon registration numbers, we're going to try to get preschoolers in 4 days a week as well. And just a little bit here with respect to the 100% digital learning. As I mentioned, the DOE is going to allow us to do that this year. Students can remain enrolled in Rockbridge County Public Schools and receive 100% of their education at home. Students who choose this option will have full access to the content and curriculum. Students that have limited access at home with respect to internet, we're certainly sensitive to that. From the surveys we've sent out, we estimate that's around 10%. Of the folks who responded to the survey, which is, it's not everybody, but we feel like that's fairly accurate. We'll certainly make sure that all of our schools and our central office at Effinger all have free Wi-Fi for them to be able to go into the parking lots to upload and download assignments. Teachers can push those out via Google Classroom and some other platform we may be using. And students don't necessarily have to come and sit in the parking lot all day long. They can upload and download assignments and so forth, and then they can go back and take that back to their homes and watch videos or finish up assignments and those sorts of things as well. For students the rare instance where it's just not possible, they can't get to a Wi-Fi, and it doesn't have to be one of our schools with respect to Wi-Fi, by the way. It could be any Wi-Fi hotspot, whether it be at Arby's or somewhere else around town that may have a Wi-Fi connection that they can connect to. But there are rare instances where parents have said, look, we don't have any internet access. There's no way we can get our child to a Wi-Fi hotspot of some sort. And in those very rare circumstances, we're going to work with a thumb drive exchange where we will upload those documents and assignments and so forth onto a thumb drive, and we'll exchange it with the student, and we'll figure out ways to get it there, whether it's through buses when we're dropping off and delivering kids, or we have to set up some sort of meeting space to be able to get that done. And again, we feel like this is fairly rare. So while this is a little bit of an inconvenience perhaps, but it's not a big deal with respect to the numbers we're talking about. A help desk will be available for parents and students to seek digital learning assistance. This will be available for all families. That's not just those who go with 100% digital learning. And then students enrolled in fully digital learning, they're going to be contacted at least 2 times per week to make sure, again, they have the supports they need to be successful. We don't want to lose these kids. We want to make sure that we're staying in close contact with them. As I said earlier, communication is huge, especially this year in the situation we're currently in. Next steps, as I mentioned, this is a broad framework. School administrators are developing more detailed plans and that will address those gaps that are in this plan, and work with teachers and parents and let them know what the day-to-day operations are going to look like. How we're going to work drop-off, how we're going to work pickups, how are we going to how we're going to work with respect to taking temperatures every day, those sorts of things. And as I said, schools have already begun reaching out to teachers and families with those plans. And in my final slide here to close, I'll just say flexibility is a must. We're getting new information about the science of COVID every day, almost every day. As a result, everything's changing. So our safety measures are going to evolve. We'll be mindful of that evolving guidance, primarily from the DOE, from the Centers for Disease Control and the Virginia Department of Health. And again, if changes need to be made, we're going to make them. So that's our commitment at this point. And again, it's not easy. I will commend all of our principals, our administrators, our teachers who have been working so diligently on this, our central office administrators. This is a pretty daunting task, and this is obviously not just a Rockbridge County issue. This is every school division in the Commonwealth and pretty much across the nation. But nobody seems to have the right answer. Anytime I'm meeting with other superintendents and other school divisions, we're all fairly close to being in the same place, honestly, all asking the same questions and looking for the same answers. And unfortunately, many of which are not yet available. So we're going to do the best we can. Where we fall short, we're going to drop back and punt and figure out a way to go another direction. And hopefully we can get this thing as right as possible so that we can make sure we are providing, again, first and foremost, a safe environment for our teachers and students. And secondly, we want to provide, a high quality education for our kids. And that's going to be more challenging this year. It's challenging every year, but it's going to be more challenging this year. But we're committed to making that happen. So with that, I'll be quiet and happy to try and answer any questions you all may have. I've asked our senior staff, a lot of our senior staff, to attend here with us this evening. In case I can't answer the question very well, I'll look for some of them to come in and help me out with it. But feel free. Does anyone have any questions at this time?
Dr. Thompson, I have a few questions and comments for you. Just so if a student is a virtual remote learner, it won't affect your ADM in any way to still count?
No, sir. I mean, the guidance we're getting right now is that essentially, and we haven't gotten the full-blown attendance guidance from DOE, but generally speaking, what we've heard from Dr. Lane is that as long as students are engaged and participating, generally speaking, then they're going to be counted present. And that's obviously a huge difference from what we're used to with respect to whether or not they're sitting in a seat or not in a classroom. But we have the flexibility that allows us, and honestly, some other waivers we've been able to tap into or will be able to tap into is huge with respect to virtual learning. So no, so that should not affect our ADM as long as they stay enrolled in Rockbridge County Public Schools. If we have families that choose to, obviously go to other school divisions, or if they choose to just go a straight homeschooling option, that obviously would affect our ADM. But as long as they stay enrolled in Rockbridge County Public Schools and participate in our blended model or our 100% digital model, then it would still stay within our ADM.
And can you allude to a little bit, and I know it's still, in process as a plan, but can you allude to a little bit about what the virtual or, digital learning environment will look like?
Yeah, and it is. It is still being developed to some degree, but some of the things we've talked about, it's going to be extremely challenging. We have some teachers that are very, very comfortable in a digital environment, and they've done it for years. We have some teachers that struggle mightily. And that's part of the reason why we wanted those extra days at the beginning of the year to provide professional development for them, to at least be able to give them a foundation moving forward. There may be some times when a little bit of synchronous learning will be going on, but primarily we're going to focus on the last thing we really want to do is, if at all possible, and this is such an odd year, some things we want to do, obviously we're not able to do. The last thing we really want to do is get into a habit of teachers just standing up front and delivering instruction. And I know with social distancing, that's challenging. But if we can get teachers who are presenting mini lessons, if you will, pre-recorded mini lessons of some sort, 15, 20, 25 minutes, and sending that out to the kids who are being taught digitally in some way, shape, or form. Those mini lessons, basically, that would give the students what they need in order to be able to go work on assignments, figure out what they have learned, what they haven't learned, what they need help with, and then when they come back in, either come back into the building or reach out to the teacher via email or phone call, whatever it may be. That's when they can ask the questions, and that would be a revolving sort of thing. Those folks, once they finish the assignment, they would do some sort of assessment. And then again, the teacher will be able to know, are they getting it? Are they not getting it? And then they would roll right back into another mini lesson of some sort.
So it won't be a live virtual learning environment they'll have to work off of. And will the teachers, you said that you're going to encourage them to do that, or are they going to be made to give some sort of lesson plan instruction to the kids?
You speaking about the digital learning students?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of ramifications with respect to putting a camera and doing a synchronous lesson with teachers in the classroom. And there's a lot of risk there with respect to having students in the classroom and a camera, honestly, in the classroom. If something were to happen, and we don't like to think that students misbehave, but every now and then things happen in a classroom, and there are privacy issues and things like that to be considered. So, again, I'm not saying that a synchronous live, as you put it, a live lesson would never be taught, but it's just something that we would have to do very, very carefully. And it's something that we're not going to encourage necessarily, simply for those reasons primarily.
But are you going to encourage teachers to do the pre-lesson tutorials?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And then in regards to mask, I didn't see anything. I saw the 6 foot distance, but I didn't see anything about mask. I was just wondering, what your policy is going to be on that, especially around whether it's teachers or kids or whatnot that have some sort of medical condition that would prevent them, from wearing a mask, whatever it may be, and how they're going to be protected from, if 95% of your population is wearing a mask, how are they going to be protected from feeling some sort of shun or whatever from those around them?
Yeah, and the shunning, I mean, that's going to take some educating on our part to make sure that obviously that students don't do that. And that's a tough thing with small children. Sometimes they're not nice to one another, and we try to educate them all the time on the proper way to act and the proper way to treat others, and that all that goes into the character of how we try to educate kids. But obviously we've never had to do this before with respect to mask or no mask and that sort of thing. So that's part of what we're going to have to do to make sure that doesn't happen. Any student that has a documented medical condition of some sort, we're obviously not going to force them to wear a mask in the classroom. And if students are wearing masks in the classroom, and this particular student is not, from my perspective, if I'm in a classroom and I'm a classroom teacher, if they're not wearing a mask, and if the easiest thing is to try and get some sort of a shield in front of them, a plexiglass shield at their desk or something or another, we may be able to do that. We may be able to distance them a little more, perhaps. And again, that may add to some of the shun you're talking about to some degree, but we're trying to be as safe as possible with respect to that.
And did you have something in there about your mask or what?
No, sir. We didn't have anything in specifically in this, because this was primarily focused on learning. Right now, what I've recommended to the school board is a policy that basically states that whenever there's a mask would be mandatory when students are riding a bus, when they're entering and exiting the building, when they're transitioning, anytime, whether it be hallways, going to the bathroom, common areas, that sort of thing, mask would be mandatory. And then it would be mandatory in the classroom whenever 6 foot of social distancing could not be maintained. If 6 feet of social distancing could be maintained, both the teacher and the students would have the option, if they chose to do so, to remove their mask at that point. And then if the teacher had to step closer to a student or working in a small group up close, obviously we would want them to put their mask back on at that point. That's a recommendation. That's not been officially approved by the school board as of yet, and we're still having that discussion, I'll be honest with you.
Okay. And then just so I'm clear, because I apologize. Sometimes you got to explain stuff to me several times, but when you say mandatory on buses or in hallways or stuff like that, that is even for a child or a teacher for that matter that has some sort of medical condition?
No, sir. Again, from my perspective, if a child has a documented medical condition, we can't force them to wear a mask, and we wouldn't want to do that. I'm certainly not going to try to overrule what a doctor says needs to happen with respect to a child or a teacher for that matter.
Dr. Thompson, my understanding is though that child would have to have a note from a doctor stating that medical condition.
Well, and it wouldn't necessarily have a note from a doctor. Yes, ma'am. I wouldn't necessarily have to know the condition. I just want something from a doctor that says that they have a condition that they should not be wearing a mask as a result of.
Correct.
I don't need to know the specific condition. If a doctor's saying you don't need to wear a mask because of a condition, that's all I think we need.
Correct.
What platform are we going to use to deliver the instruction remotely?
As of right now, my understanding is we're going to primarily focus with Google Classroom because many of our teachers are fairly familiar with it. We have a little bit of some virtual Virginia there that we may access at the secondary level. We're going to try really hard we don't want 3 or 4 different platforms out there if we can avoid it. That's pretty confusing for parents and students alike. But right now, primarily Google Classroom. And Mr. Martino, if there's something I'm missing there, feel free to jump in.
Dr. Thompson, we may, Mr. Lyons, just to answer your question. Sorry. 1 second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hand, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to speak for the secondary level, Mr. Lyons. Obviously, if we've got students who are digital remote at home and they're in a AP level course, obviously we're going to invite the Virtual Virginia platform because we realize that and recognize that as being a pretty it's pretty reliable and pretty credible way for us to be able to deliver that content. We also have the division has also purchased and has had this in existence for the past couple of years, and we've had a lot of success with it. Was Edgenuity, which is another platform that we use that we can offer students to take these courses with the teachers customizing it so that it's not self-paced, so that we can kind of go on a day-to-day basis if we need to. And we're hoping that our teachers are going to be integrating that into their daily delivery with students when they're in the classroom. So there's not a whole lot of deviation away from those students who may go from a hybrid blended learning platform over to a digital platform during this exercise.
Haywood, can you repeat that? The other platform, not Virtual Virginia, we had a lightning and I missed it. The second one.
Is that Edgenuity? Haywood?
Ingenuity. I got it. I heard annuity. That was it. Okay. Thank you.
Also, Dr. Lyons, we are going to hold community meetings, whether virtual or in person, most likely virtual, to make sure that parents understand these platforms. We're going to give a demonstration of how they can access them with their child to make sure that they can provide assistance at home if necessary. We plan to have 6 of those, and we're working on those right now.
Has there been any thought to reaching out to the homeschoolers and inviting them to participate virtually and boost the ADM for a year?
Yeah, we're in the process of doing that as well. We haven't had a lot of takers thus far, but we're working on that.
One of the, I've heard from several parents and teachers and different people who like to share their opinion. And I've told them I'm no longer on the school board, and that's right now it's probably a good thing. Y'all have had such a monumental task to take on, and I applaud each of you for doing so. And I think, as Dr. Thompson said, there's really no perfect answer. Everybody's got an opinion. You're not going to satisfy everybody, and it's you've got some things where, to the average citizen, it may seem like a common sense, sensible approach that, due to policy or regulations or laws or whatnot, you may not be able to meet their need. Having said all that, I do, from what I gather from the people I've talked with, I do think there's a sense of disappointment in the remote virtual learning environment, that it's not necessarily a live mode where kids can log on in the morning from their home and follow their classes or teachers throughout the day and receive basically the same type of instruction that is being provided in the classroom. I think from what I've heard, some parents would opt to keep their kids home. If that was an option, they just don't necessarily think that it's the way it's being presented so far, and the details may not have been ironed out. So it could very well change that, they just don't feel like that's a viable option, because they don't want their kids to get behind or miss stuff or anything like that. And they're worried about how the tutorials and all like that will be issued or given. So that, and that's not, I don't think that's a take or a bad take on Dr. Thompson or the administration or the school board or anything like that. I think it's across the board, basically the majority of the Commonwealth. I think your plan mirrors a lot of other school divisions. There's a few that I think are going virtually, but I think a lot of people just saw this as an opportunity to be more innovative, to be to kind of change how we educate and our learning environments from what we've been doing for forever, to offer some new solutions. The more kids that you could have online or remote learning, obviously helps with your transportation issues, helps with your social distancing issues, helps with your exposure issues for your teachers and administrators in the building. I wonder about, what happens if we have some sort of elevated numbers or cases or in one building. Do you shut down one building? Do you shut down the entire division? What happens during that time period? If you don't have a really good, solid online learning environment, do kids get behind? Do they fall? I mean, what happens if a teacher gets it and has to be out for 2 weeks? How are you going to find a sub to keep up with, that learning environment and stuff? So kudos to you for doing what you've done. You know, there is no perfect answer and everything. I think a lot of people were just really hoping for a more innovative online learning environment.
David, if I could just respond to that. I totally understand your concern. I have discussed with Dr. Thompson that I think as challenging as this year is going to be, as hard as our teachers and administrators are working and will work to make the best of a really bad situation, I do think that we are going to be finding new ways as we go along. And you know, when we get on the other side of this, things probably will be different in public education for the better. But you're right. There are so many challenges when you think about safety. You've got the safety of people who feel like they can't send their kids to the buildings because they're not going to be safe. But then you have kids who are at home who may very well be more safe in a building. So it's a big year of monumental challenges, and I would encourage everyone to, when you're talking to constituents, just ask for their patience and their cooperation, because we really need everybody to do everything they can to support the kids and to also support the teachers and administrators who are working hard to try to make the best of it. And thank you all too. You guys are part of our team in your role as supervisors.
And I agree. I believe it's will change the face, and a lot of it for good. But, you know, I spent a lot of nights sitting up worrying about a lot of these kids before COVID, you know, and you know, I just feel, you know, if we can't rely on half of the parents of the Rockbridge County to feed their children, how can we rely on them to help educate them? So I'm looking forward to having our kids back in schools for sure.
Mr. McDaniel, I'll say, you know, I know you know this, so, and I'm not one, I don't like making excuses, but it feels like making excuses when I tell you that, you know, we have conversations all the time since March about what about this and what about that, and it seems like every time we come up with an answer that sounds pretty decent, that's a pretty good idea. All of a sudden we start thinking, well, okay, if we do this, how are we going to do X, and how are we going to do Y, and how are we going to make A work? And it seems like at every turn we make, there's something there, another challenge, another roadblock that's trying to keep us from doing it. And, you know, we certainly, you know, that has happened, and we have figured out ways to overcome many of those roadblocks. But some of the innovative things that I'm sure you and your constituents, the citizens that have been talking with you, you know, there may be roadblocks there that just have prevented us from being able to go down that road. I don't know, because obviously I don't know everything that they were necessarily speaking to, but yeah, it's not easy. And it's, again, I know you know this, but it's one of those things we're just going to try to make sure we provide as valuable an education as we can. And hope for some normalcy to get back to where we can get back into the buildings sooner rather than later, if at all possible. But you're right. If we have a turn for the worse, and hopefully we do not, we may be in another 100% digital environment before we know it. And you know, at this point, there are no excuses. You know, we were caught off guard in March. We're not going to be caught off guard again. I think our teachers didn't like being caught off guard, and they don't want to be caught off guard either. So they'll be ready, and they'll be ready to educate whatever way we have to, as it is dictated to us in large part by this pandemic, unfortunately.
And I'll just add to, having spoken with teachers who were reaching out to students in the spring when schools closed, you know, again, sometimes they couldn't find their kids. So there are limitations to what we can do just by the nature of being in contact. So it's tough.
And if I can weigh in as well, I don't think we can ever compare anything that's going to happen in the future to what happened last spring. It obviously caught us all off guard. And I think everybody probably did the best they could. I know there were some times there were glitches, and we tried to find new ways to get the children engaged and learning. And just from a personal experience, I know my own grandson in Virginia Beach. He went to the woods with his grandpa, not my husband, his other grandpa, up in some county in the middle of Virginia. I'm not sure where exactly they were. And he hunted and fished and had fun until the 2 weeks before everything was due. And then he ran home and did his work. So we know those things are happening. And I think a testament to this 3 weeks coming up is going to be the hard work the teachers put in, learning new ways. They've learned a lot already, but there's so much else out there. And I think Dr. Thompson, Dr. Haywood, and everybody else has worked really hard to find new and fun ways to teach each other. I've seen it on many different websites and share it a whole bunch myself. I know there's a lot of different ways. So I think, as Wendy said initially, is offering as much support as possible, trying to keep everybody as positive as possible, knowing full well that we could all be at home, you know, in 3 weeks from now, maybe school won't start at all. You know, we just have to be flexible in that regard. Thanks for all you guys are doing, though, to support us.
I think, as everyone has already mentioned, we have to take into account teachers and staff and you know, all the stakeholders that are playing a part in this entire situation, and especially parents who are taking on a role that they haven't had to, you know, kind of, I guess, be a major participant in the past. And so when we take into account childcare, you know, I'm glad to know that we're thinking about different options where we're allowing parents, working parents, to take the role in helping educate their students. And, you know, instead of, you know, having, you know, certain times, being able to log on at you know, at different times and help their child in their education.
The last thing I had, and I certainly understand and appreciate the thoughts. At one point, I think Dr. Thompson said something about some hurdles and obstacles and stuff like that. And I can only speak for myself here. I'm not speaking for the supervisors or county or anybody else, but you know, if it is a very challenging time, there is so many what ifs. There are unknowns. But you know, if obstacles or hurdles are presented and it's a technology issue, it's possibly, you know, for whatever reason, like you're talking about a child who just doesn't have internet access or something like that, or if it's something, you know, the teachers in the classroom need or whatever it is, you know, I would appreciate if you make us aware of that. Not that we can do anything or do everything or whatnot, but the part of it is, we know the budget cycle was very tough this past year. It's probably gonna be tough for the next couple of years. But educating our kids is something that we have to do, and we have to do well. So if there is a need or there's something presenting an obstacle or a hurdle, you know, ask, let us know. There's no promises there. There's nothing, you know, we can do there, but we can't help if we don't know what you need either. So don't be bashful with that. And that's coming from me. I'm not speaking for the rest of the supervisors.
Sure, of course, and thank you, Mr. McDaniel. And I know the entire Board of Supervisors would support us any way they can if the means are there. I'm grateful for what you all do for us. I will say, as of right now, the primary need, and I've mentioned this in emergency management meetings. I don't attend all of them, but one not long ago I attended where there's an awful lot of community agencies involved and from all the localities. I mentioned it there. I've mentioned it a couple of other times through some other Board of Supervisors members and just passing in conversation. But a huge need right now is going to be childcare for our citizens, and certainly teachers are a part of that. But it's not just teachers, it's other folks in our community, and trying to go back to work. If we're asking our teachers to come back to work and their kids aren't in school 3 days a week, some of them, it's going to be tough. And it's not just a matter of, if the childcare is not available, or there are just fewer of them, not being able to find one to be able to access, whether it's whether it's free, whether it's they pay for it, whether it's a reduced cost, whatever. But first and foremost, we just have to make sure that those opportunities are available. And I don't have the answers to this. I really don't. But I do know that weighs heavily on a lot of our teachers' minds. And again, I'm not trying to single them out. I'm here advocating for them, but because obviously there's a lot of other folks in the community that have similar concerns. But that is certainly something that just to kind of put on your radar a little bit, all of your radars a little bit, just whatever we can do as a community to try and help. I'm happy to sit at the table anytime to try and have that conversation.
Philip, what's the condition of our preschools? Are we operating those in the same way?
We're going to try and get our preschools in 4 days a week, and that's going to depend on our registration numbers, but we think right now we'll be able to get them in 4 days a week, not the Wednesday when we're doing the collaboration, but Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay, so that will help. I mean, part of the problem with the childcare that's been offered in our community is that they have to distance too. So everybody, even if they can't operate at full capacity, is what I understand. So even if all childcare facilities were doing everything they could do, they'd still be down a certain percentage. Am I wrong about that? Is that one of our problems?
That's my understanding as well. I think it's still 10-1. I think it's the ratio. I think that's still out there right now. So even if it's not like you can pack the kids in like you used to be able to do anymore, obviously. So I think that is part of the problem.
Right. Are there
even in a good year, there's not enough childcare in Rockbridge County. Regardless of the pandemic, it's a need that's existing already.
Mm-hmm. And in the city schools, that I heard that they were going to be offering some on, of course, the Y and then the Tammy's group, but they're also offering their teachers a way to bring their kids into the school. Will there be any possibility of that or no?
Well, certainly a possibility. We've been talking about that for a while, trying to figure out a way to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
The unfortunate piece is right now with the employees we have, and Lexington City, I'm sure is in the same boat because there are so many additional tasks that have to be done just in trying to help make sure that the day is running smoothly and safely, making sure kids are socially distanced, taking temperatures, all these extra things that have to be done. It's hard to pull even say teachers' assistants or somebody away to say, we'd like for you to go down here and help with this child care because they're just needed. The personnel, when I've talked with Bobby Wagner as well, and I don't want to speak for Bobby, certainly. I certainly don't know her business. But my understanding from her is that, a lot of her employees are college students who probably will be going back to school here pretty soon, or part-time employees who don't necessarily want to work full-time. So just finding people, I think, is a monumental. Right. I've told Bobby, from our perspective, certainly for our teachers, and, I'd be willing to have the conversation about for, other folks, if we have to try and house something in our buildings, we can find a way to make it work. But it's truly, from my perspective, it's who's going to do it and how are we going to pay for it. And again, I'm not saying that teachers necessarily shouldn't have to pay something on it, but it would be nice if we could find some way to help them do that so that they could come in and concentrate on educating other students when they're not worried about where their own are and what's going on with them.
Well, it's a lot to work out, and thank you all for, you must be pulling out your hair. You really must be. And I thank you.
A little bit. Thank you. We're good. We're good. Thank you. Any other questions at this time? I'll be happy to try and answer.
I understood what you said, Corey.
Well, thank you all. It sounds like all the questions have been answered for now. So unless there's any objections, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Day, you still with us?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you all.
And I will do the same for my board. Is there a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your time this evening. I hope that you enjoyed the Quinn Evans presentation. I think they've done a good job in painting a picture for us of what the future may look like. So we look forward to further discussions with you all at a later time about what comes next.
Thank you. Stay safe and well.
Thank you.